Hello my lovelies, and a very warm welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you brought your library cards, my absolute angels. Hope you're very well. Let's plunge straight in, shall we? It's quite warm outside, a sensible person would have filmed probably outdoors, but let's face it, that's not me. So here we are indoors again because I am what? British. So yeah, welcome to part 2 of my, well, point of fact, if you've watched the first video in this kind of mini series, you will know that this year I'm undertaking the Waterstones Deansgate Summer Reading Challenge. Don't worry if you missed that, I will link it in the description. I'm not going to rehash it all now because that's just a waste of time for the video length, so do go and remind yourself there. But if you have seen that, or even if you haven't, you will now know that I've completed the first column of the bingo card style prompts, and I'm about to embark on the second. But before I do that, I just wanted to sort of do a quick, not too in-depth recap of what I read for each of the prompts from last time, and just let you know how I got on with them, really. And then we'll move on to the next set of prompts. So the first prompt that I undertook was the one to read a book that's won a prize, and I chose Tomb of Sand by Gitanjali Shree, translated by Daisy Rockwell, from the Hindi originally, and this won both the English Pen Award and the International Booker Prize. And this is a novel set in northern India about an old woman who falls into a depression after her husband died, an older woman I should say, and refuses to leave her bed. And then it's about her children's kind of struggle to, you know, bring her back to reality, as it were. But then she does, and then she befriends a woman called Rosie, who's a member of the Hijra, and her life takes a sort of new lease, as it were. But you know, it's a novel that is much deeper than that. Which I suspect is one of the reasons that it was up for and won the International Booker, because it deals with these sort of large themes that are, you know, through the domestic. But I don't want to say that this is a novel of domesticity, because it isn't. These kind of huge themes are given the weight that they deserve. So they're talking about things like partition and boundaries and borders, and the differences, the gaps in both communication and relation between people in really a very sort of moving way. But it's also whimsical. There's conversations with crows. There's flights of fancy where you don't really know what's going on for a while, but that's okay because you just sort of go with it. And what I found really interesting was that what the translator Daisy Rockwell in her notes at the back sort of talks about is trying to capture the sense of playfulness in the language that was present in the Hindi, but in doing so make something that didn't kind of take away from the original but also became its own thing. You know, I think we've discussed on the channel before about how translations of things often result in a kind of 3 properties: the original, the translation, and the gap that is somewhere in the middle. And maybe, you know, the experience of the reader is somewhere between the two. So I'm going to do a bigger video about prize-winning fiction at some point, so I don't want to say too much on this, but I really enjoyed this. And although it looks massive, it was actually very easy to read, and in many ways quite moving, and the use of language is really stunning. So that's how I got on with that. So I'm going to give that 4 sniffs out of 5. The second one was to read something that was published the year you were born, and I decided to go with, because I've never read Ernest Hemingway, I decided to go with The Garden of Eden, which was his posthumously published novel. This is a really interesting one. I read this really quickly as well, and it's about a couple who get married, and you later find out that they've not actually known each other that long. And he's a writer, and she is kind of she describes herself as almost like his patron, and it's about this kind of strange erotic game they play where she's playing with gender and the idea of whether she's male, female, or something else, and then they both become infatuated with this same woman, and then a sort of throuple emerges, but it's not really a throuple. I'm not explaining this very well, but it's written very sparsely and to the point, which I quite like. Sort of wondering if that's a lot of what people used to talk about when they talked about Hemingway as a writer who kind of revitalized what the English language was doing, particularly in American literature. But yeah, it has a sense of whimsy itself as well, similar to Tube of Sand, albeit in a very different way. And I actually thought for the time, because he wrote this in, like, he started working on this in 46 and up until his death in 61, but it wasn't published till 86. And I actually kind of think that the stuff about gender that's going on and relationship structures and what they look like and stuff is actually much, it's very contemporary and kind of speaks to our modern understandings of that in a way that you wouldn't expect from that time period, if that makes sense. So I had a good time with this. It's sparse and it's an unfinished novel, much like the Mystery of Edwin Drood, but I thought it was intriguing. I mean, I'm going to try more Hemingway. I actually quite fancy The Old Man and the Sea, which I also know is very short. So, you know, I do like a nice short, to-the-point novel. The next prompt was first in a series, and I chose to go with The Bone Shard Daughter, which is the first in a trilogy, I believe. What's the name of the trilogy? Oh, it's called The Drowning Empire. And this is set in a fictionalized series of islands, moving islands, basically, that are under the command of an empire led by the emperor, who practices bone shard magic, which is basically he takes a little piece of the skull of every citizen and uses them to etch things on, which then powers constructs, which are kind of like chimera style creatures made of lots of different body parts from things. I've just described what a chimera is, so there's no need to use chimera. But and then it's about his daughter, Lynn, who is supposed to take over for him when he steps down from the throne or dies, and she has a rivalry with a fellow person who may take over in her stead. And there's also a smuggler called Jovis, who's quite an interesting character, who has a little creature called Methy, who we're not really sure what the creature is. They kind of find each other on the seas and help each other out, and he's searching for his lost wife or partner. I can't remember if they're married or not. And then there is also the daughter. It's 4 plot lines. There's the daughter of the governor of one of the islands and her attempt to persuade her partner to marry her, but her partner's a kind of social justice person, and he's working with the people who are called the Shardless Few, who have not had their bone shards removed and are trying to seek a rebellion. And there's also a mysterious woman called Sand who can't remember how she arrived on a particular island. So if that sounds like a lot, it is, but it's a sprawling fantasy novel, and it's the first of a trilogy, so, you know, the 4 plot lines are interesting. The magic system I really enjoyed in this, and I really enjoyed the stuff about creatures and constructs and stuff like that. I think it's good. I'm not sure I'm going to carry on with the series. I don't know if I was interested enough to pick up another 2 of the novels, particularly when they're quite lengthy. I thought the characters were generally pretty well drawn, but it was one of those, and this is no disrespect to the author, who does a really, really good job in this, but I would have liked, and that's my personal preference, I would have liked more of the magic and the creatures and less of the relationships in some respects. I know that's probably contrary to what a lot of people want from a fantasy novel, but it was good. I may in the future pick up another like the next one in the series, which I believe is called The Bone Shard Emperor. But for now, I'm glad I read it, but I don't feel immediately compelled to go and get the next one. The third prompt was to watch a Booktube TV or film series. So I watched the recent BBC adaptation of The Woman in White, which was very good. I have very little to say about it. It's available on Amazon, included in Prime if you've got Prime. If not, I'm sure you'll be able to find a knowledge stream from which to find it. It's very good. Yeah, Jessie Buckley is excellent as Marion Halcombe. Ben Hardy, very good as Walter. The actor, his name escapes me now, which is annoying because he's very famous, who plays Mr. Fairley, is very good. My one criticism would be that they made Count Fosco much more attractive. Well, obviously that's a matter of opinion, than he is in the book, which is a bit like, why'd you do that? Although then again, when they did the West End musical of Woman in White, they did it as Michael Crawford in a humongous fat suit, and I just sort of think, what's the point in hiring actors and then completely changing their physical appearance? But that's a separate conversation. But yeah, it's solid. It's a pretty faithful retelling of the book. So if you like The Woman in White, which I do, I think you'll probably enjoy it. And finally, the last prompt was to read something by your favourite author, which was contentious because I have loads and I'm not particularly faithful, but I decided to go with the Jane Austen that I haven't read and listen to the audiobook of Persuasion, which was beautiful, as I believe Jane Austen usually is. It's interesting. It's a lot of stuff about lost love, mistakes, many of the societal conventions that Jane Austen returned to again and again in her books. And what's so interesting, I think, is that the fundamental relationship stuff doesn't really change. Like, all those situations are completely and directly applicable. The styles are different, but in general manner of speaking, to things we would experience now, and the way that people's miscommunication, their pride and prejudice, their lack of sense and sensibility continues to impact them. It was good. It was really, really nice. I listened to a male narrator. I can't remember his name now. I'm very uninformed, and he was decent. He was decent. He was clearly an actor who knows how to tell a story. So I really, really enjoyed that. Some real moments of poignancy from the story as well. And I'm just reminded that Jane Austen is so clever in seeming to talk about society at large in terms of its frivolity and its gossip, but actually being able to reflect on much, much deeper things bubbling under the surface. So there we go. Week 1 down. Let's see what the next set of prompts are. Okay, so let's have a little gander at the next series of prompts. There we go. Now you can see where I've ticked off the first series with those rather obnoxious green crosses, and now we're on the second column, highlighted in pink. So the prompts are: a book you've been putting off reading, a book by an author of colour, a book with a star on the cover, and a book over 200 pages long. So finally, I'm separating this slightly because it's an instructional prompt as opposed to a kind of a themed one, which is just read a book outside. So let's see what choices I'm going to make for these prompts. Okay, so them's the prompts. Now let's get to the choices for this second round of the reading challenge. A reminder that I am using books that I already own, either electronically in audio or physical format, for several reasons. 1, to decrease my TBR, and 2, to, it feels, I don't know, prudent to just, and less wasteful to not buy new things. Let's not pick at the holes of logic in that, but there we go. No, I am trying to be really prudent actually at the moment with decreasing my TBR pile, and also parting with books by passing them on that I've read but don't want to keep as like forever copies or whatever. So because simply put, I don't have enough money for a house that would have to be big enough for the number of books that I want. So it's a hard process, but there we go. Anyway, onto the prompts. So, a book you've been putting off reading, I've decided to go with Verity by Colleen Hoover. And this is an interesting one because, conversely, the reason I've been putting it off is probably the reason that I picked it up in the first place. So, the blurb itself describes it as a TikTok sensation with over 200,000 5-star reviews. So, I was at one point contemplating doing a kind of TikTok sensation books vlog, but then I realized that I don't have TikTok and I'm not really interested in TikTok. Don't hate me. But by that point, this was one of the ones I was going to read. So I think conversely, what's put me off reading it is the fact that it's been so popular, which I realise is inverted snobbery. So I'm going to work through that and read this. Also, I believe that Colleen Hoover is, and correct me if I'm wrong, primarily a romance writer, contemporary romance writer. I could be wrong there, but I'm not really interested in that as a genre. But this one has a kind of crimey, thrillery vibe that might be interesting. So super quick verb, super quick blurb for this one, which is: Lowen Ashley is a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin when she accepts the job offer of a lifetime. Jeremy Crawford, the husband of best-selling author Verity Crawford, has hired her to complete the remaining books in a successful series his injured wife is unable to finish. She arrives at the home ready to sort through years of Verity's notes and outlines, hoping to find enough material to get started. What she doesn't expect to uncover in the chaotic office is an unfinished autobiography Verity never intended anyone to read. Page after page of bone-chilling admissions, including Verity's recollection of the night her family was forever altered. So this sounds quite intriguing, actually, and much more up my vibe, much more up my street, with a vibe that I can get on board with. Much more up my vibe. That's my album title. So that's the first prompt. Second one, I'm going to go... Oh, yeah, this one is a book by an author of colour. So I've decided to go with... And I have hauled this before, so you will have seen it. I think I put it on anticipated books and then just never got around to reading it yet. So now I will do that. I'm going to go with Wahala by Nikki May. Which is a beautiful edition as well. This is the Waterstones edition with the sprayed edges. And this is about 3 mixed race friends living in London in, you know, kind of contemporary, or the now, basically. And it's about their lives, their loves, their experiences of everyday racism, but also they're kind of looking to the future and pondering what's going on. And then a 4th friend from way back, I believe, called Isabel, arrives in town and is determined to, I'm reading from the blurb here, fix their futures for them, and soon cracks in their friendship appear, and it's soon obvious that Isabel is not sorting but wrecking their lives. When she's driven to a terrible act, the women are forced to reckon with a crime in their past that may have just repeated itself. Full disclosure, I've already started reading this, and so far I'm having a really, really good time with it. Let's show you the picture of the author as well, because it's a lovely photograph. There's lovely Nikki May. I believe this is her debut novel as well. It's due to be turned into a major BBC TV serial. So the more you know, getting on the ground floor. So there we go. Okay, so the third prompt is a book with a star on the cover, and I've decided to go for a non-fiction, because I don't think I've done any non-fiction so far as I recall in this reading challenge, have I? No. So, anyway, I'm going to go with Clubland, How the Working Men's Clubs Shaped Britain. And this is by Pete Brown. You see lots of stars on the cover just to prove that I'm not trying to fake it up. So this is basically about, it's a kind of history or a journey through, would we call it a phenomenon, I guess, or institution of working men's clubs in the United Kingdom. You know, which is very sort of, if anybody doesn't know, they're kind of local clubs that would be within communities and would kind of be a place where people went to drink, to socialise and so on and so forth historically. And they'd also have acts on, what they would call, and I would call, well, my grandparents certainly would call, like turns. Like you'd have a singer on and there'd be a committee and all sorts. They were just like entertainment venues, basically. But the reason I'm really interested in this in particular, not only because I think it speaks a lot to working class history generally and cultural history, but also because, so I made a show a few years ago called Wake Up Maggie with my colleague Emma Bramley from All Things Considered Theatre, which, funnily enough, those vegan guys vlogged about. I will leave a link to that video in the description if you're interested. And that was about examining working class culture, growing up working class and then finding yourself in the arts and being unsure of your place in the world and so on and so forth. And we touched a lot on working men's club culture there. So I'm really, really interested in it as a kind of cultural institution, I suppose, and also as a kind of, just from the socioeconomic perspective, I guess, let's call it that. I lost track of that sentence there. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to read for that. I will report back. The front cover describes it as The Beer Drinker's Bill Bryson. That's Times Literary Supplement. So high praise indeed. So fourth book, a book that is over 200 pages. I'm going to go with an ebook, so I don't have a copy of it at the moment. And I'm slightly cheating because I think the book in question is 288 pages in its print format. So it's just kind of over the prompt. But I haven't really wanted to get to this for quite a while, and it's called The Woman in the Library by Solari Gentile, which is a mystery kind of thriller about a group of 4 people who meet quite by accident in the Boston Public Library and are drawn together when they hear a woman scream, and it's about the repercussions of that. And there's murder, mystery, intrigue, and thrills aplenty, apparently. So yeah, I'm going to read that in the ebook format, and hopefully that'll be quite a quick, snappy, what I call a bedtime read. So I'm looking forward to that one. I will report back more on that because I realised that blurb was incredibly vague. And then finally, the 5th prompt, I love these nice easy ones, which is read a book outside. Now, I don't know about where you are at the moment, but as of when I'm filming this, we're having a kind of mini heat wave. I believe there's an amber alert out in the UK at the moment. So I'm doing a lot of reading outdoors anyway. So that's a nice simple one to tick off there. So there we go. Those are the 4 choices I've made to answer this 2nd series of prompts. That's a lot of numbers. For the Waterstones Deansgate Summer Reading Challenge. So do check in the following vlog, in which, as per this one, I'll debrief on these latest choices and then set up my next series of choices. So lovely. Thanks for joining me again. Let me know if you're getting involved in the readathon or the challenge at all, or any of the challenges you're involved in, or if you just want to drop me a comment to say hey, or let me know what you're reading, if you think any of these sound great, if you think any of these sound boring. It's perfectly valid. For comment is free. But in the meantime, if you're in the UK, stay hydrated. Or anywhere else that it's particularly warm, and put your library cards somewhere safe because you don't want to get sweat all over them. Wow, that was gross. But the library is now closed for the time being, but I will see you when we next open, and do take care of yourselves and the people around you that you love. Much love and book sniffs. Mwah.